Hey, what's up everybody? Moving on and forward with our lead capture form. I didn't even change the screen. Let's get down to business. Let's get serious here, turn your hats backwards, pump your jams up. It's gonna be time to rock and roll here. So we got our email field. So now we need our name field, and then we need to finish our lead capture form itself. And so let's get to it. So let's go to we don't have a name field yet. So let's right click components, go to new file, and we're going to call this name field. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, why are you calling it a name field? Because what if it, you could use the same field for an address or something else. But I think it's better to modularize it and as best you can like this, because it means it's more segregated and less code for each file. So meaning let's say I had an address field, but I needed to write a bunch of logic, so I need to format some addresses. Maybe I have to format it if it's a name field, or capitalize the first letter if it's a name, but if it's an address to this, I don't want to write all that code. It's much better just to break it up like this. So name field. Notice how I didn't name it first name field though, or last name field, because there is a level of customization that you can do or have passed down to it, which we'll do a little bit of that. So var react equals require react. Okay, and let's go ahead and say var name field equals react create class. Okay, and so let's go ahead and render. Get the boilerplate. What is going on? What is this? This is not even code. This is a function. Oh my goodness, what is going on here? Okay, and let's go ahead and export this. Module.exports equals name field. Okay, so what is a name field going to have? Well, it's going to be an input field, and it's going to have a similar state situation that we have as the other input field. So let's just assume that it's going to be similar to the email field, but with a little bit less code. So let's go ahead and return. We'll return some JSX here. Put some semicolons in just for fun. Input class name equals form control. That's a bootstrap control to make it look nice and pretty. Placeholder equals, now this is interesting. So we called it a name field, but what if it's a first name versus a last name? What do we want the placeholder to be? Well, I think we should have that passed in from an upper level component. So let's do that. So placeholder is going to be this.props type. We're going to call the name of this property type, and we're going to say plus space name. So you see what I'm saying? In the type, someone's going to either pass in the word called first or the word called last, okay? And then same thing, on change, we need to detect when it changes, right? So on change equals this dot on change, okay? Let's just go ahead and end this input for right now. And it's getting bigger here. Let's do value. One thing I don't do, which I probably could and should while I'm teaching, multi-line stuff drives me crazy, but you can do this. You guys are like cheering. You're like, yes, finally he's doing this. I'm so sick of going off the side of the screen. All right. I give in. All right, this dot state dot value. Okay, so same thing as before, value on change. Do I really have to explain all this again? I'm just kidding. You can always rewatch the other one, but it's the same thing we just did, okay? So placeholder, good, on change. We need the on change function now, which will go here. On change is a function. It takes the event, which will get called and passed through automatically when this handler is called here. Okay, this is not a prop, mind you. This is an actual event that React overriding. So that looks good to me. And so what do we want to have happen? Well, we just want to change the state in this case. So because this is not a required field. We could write code to make these fields required or not, but in our case, we're not going to make this a required field. So I'm just going to set the value to be e.target.value. So basically, every time there's a change, let's go ahead and set the state. And then also we can set the get initial state. Don't want to do that problem again. And there we go. Let's go ahead and return value. So on initial state, it's just going to be empty. Okay. What else? So, okay, again, input field. That's the style. Form control looks nice. Placeholder, this.props.type plus name. We're going to pass in the type that it is. So it'll either say first name or last name or middle name. Pretty cool, right? We just made a kind of reusable component with it. See, did it really make sense to have 3 fields, first name field, last name field, middle name field? I mean, in this case, not really. A little bit of logic goes a long way. So in this case, no. And then onChange is this.onChange. It calls this and it sets the state with the new value. And then the value here, of course, is being driven from the state. Okay, that looks good to me. React, good. Okay, so lead capture. Okay, we've got our panel. So we just need to put stuff in here. Well, that's all. So first let's import them. Actually, we can't put anything unless we import them. So var email field equals require. And we are in the same folder. So we're going to say email field.jsx. Var name field equals require. Okay. / name field.jsx. Okay. Then down here, let's just put our stuff in here. We'll put the name field at the top. So we'll just say name field. And remember, we have a type. So type equals, in our case, we're just going to say first name. This lead capture form just wants a first name. Okay. There's the name field. And let's go to email field. All right. And that's good for now, I suppose. Okay. There's the name field. There's the email field. Okay. Button. So class name, let's make it a bootstrap button. So button primary. That's wrong. Okay, so there's a button. What do we want to have happen? Let's think this through. I just started writing code, but now it's time to think it through. So when I click this button, I want to make sure that the fields are valid. Meaning, if the email field is not valid, okay, then I want to send out an alert. Would you really do that? Probably not. You'd probably have something more elegant, like change the UI around, swap things out, make some type of error field or something like that, or a message appears and disappears. That's probably what we would do. In our case, we're just going to do an alert. By the way, if you don't know this already, you already know React now. So long as you got components down and state down, you really know React and like the tooling and stuff that we've already set up. And it's just anything after that is just a matter of more practice and solving problems. So pretty much from here on out, we are going to talk about some more complex principles, but it's all practice and getting really good and seeing how the different ways we can use the tools in our belt. But you can do whatever you want from this point on. So class name, button primary, and on click. So we want to click it and have a function that's called whenever we submit the form, of course. That makes sense. So this on submit. Okay. And let's just make the button say submit and button. Okay, so there we go. First name, email field. Okay, that looks good to me. So let's create that submit function here. We're going to call this on submit. So we'll say on submit, and that's going to be a function. It does take an event. I'm not sure we'll use it, but we'll just keep it there anyway. And so we're going to call this onSubmit function and see if it's valid or not. How do we do that? So what we know so far is our name field right here has a value, and our email field has a value and a valid. So how do we, I guess what we really want to check is if the email field's valid, because we want to show that alert if the email field's valid. But we also need the values out of both of these because we're going to need that data. So that's interesting. So how do we get data from inner props? We haven't really talked about that yet. And so there's a couple ways of doing it. One is you could pass in a callback through a property, and then the callback of the parent class is what gets called with the data. But, and if you don't understand, it's okay because we're not going to do that. But if you do understand, I might not do it that way because once you start calling parent callbacks, you're forcing your component to rely on a parent. And I don't want to force my component to rely on a parent as much as possible. I mean, you're going to have to some extent, but a function seems a little bit overweight for that. So what we're going to do is we're going to use refs, where you can actually ref the components inside. So we need this valid and we need this true. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, on each of these components here, I'm going to pass in a ref. Okay. Ref equals, we're going to call this, call it whatever you want. It's just an ID. So I'm going to say field name and put a ref on this guy here. Ref equals field email. And so what this is going to do is it's going to let us access those those references via the state of the object. And so in our onSubmit, I can now say, let's say we want to validate the email, right? I can say if this.refs, I can grab refs dot field email dot state dot valid. So what we're saying here is this is what we're doing. Refs, anytime you store a ref right here, okay, it goes into your refs automatically behind the scenes. It's just stored there. So we can say if this.refs, it's grabbing a reference to your field email. So if this.refs, so if my email field, okay, and by the way, this is field email. It's not the same name as this. This is email field, right? Well, all it's doing is that's the ID that we gave it, which is right here. And so once we grab that, it basically grabs the element, and that's what we're talking to now. It's just kind of a renamed. It's an ID, okay? So we're grabbing the state, and we're seeing if it's valid. So literally, we are grabbing this value right here from the state. Really cool, right? From the parent component, which is exactly what we want. So lead capture. So if it's not valid, let's go ahead and just say alert, you suck at filling out forms. Email is always required in a lead capture form. Dummy. Okay, so there's our alert if the email is not valid. Otherwise, let's do an otherwise here. So we're going to say else. Well, we're not actually going to talk to a server here, but this is where you submit it to your server or your email client, so or your email server. So var, we're going to say HTTP request body. So we're going to pretend like we're going to create a body for an HTTP request that we'd send somewhere. And we can say this.refs.field email.state.value. So we can still access the ref just like that. This time we're grabbing the value out of the state. And the first name is going to be this.refs.field name.state.value. Okay. So there's our object. And cool. Very cool. So I'm liking it. What else do we need here? That looks good to me. You with me so far? Got a name field, an email field, button field. When the button's clicked, we call this.onSubmit, which is right here. Then what we do is we grab the email field through the reference that we passed in down here, okay? And that's how we track it. And then we grab the state and see if it's valid. So that valid key is just this one right here, one that we created and made up. State.valid, and then we send an alert if it's not valid, of course. That's what the exclamation point's for. Else, let's create the request, so this is where you send request to email host or server. And that looks good to me. And then here's our rendering. It's a panel. Okay, I'm liking where this is going. Let's go ahead and set up some HTML and just render it and see how it looks. So right now we've got this email in here. Let's get rid of that. And let's go ahead and first off, let's set a div class equals, this is now HTML, so we're not using class name, and that's a Bootstrap class container. Okay, it's going to make a nice little container in the page for us. Div ID, and we're just going to put the actual form here. So lead capture is what we'll call it, so we can reference it in our JSX. And let's do that now. Let's go ahead and pull in our lead capture equals require and quotes. We're getting there. Woo! And then lead capture is in the components folder, so /components/lead capture.jsx. Okay, and that looks good. Let's put it in here, lead capture, and I believe I called the ID lead capture as well. Okay, lead capture. So it's all in. Let's go into our, no, that looks good to me. So let's go find the page. Is it still loaded in HTML somewhere maybe? Public index. Hey, look at that. Ooh. I don't like the spacing here, and I don't like the fact that it's stuck to the top of the wall, but it's okay. First name, so we'll say Bob. Email, B-O-B. Oh, it's invalid at bo.com. Hey, it worked. So let's see what happens if it's invalid and we submit it. You suck at filling out forms. Email is always required in a lead capture form, dummy. Oh, all right. By the way, don't ever do that. I kind of wish we could make websites where we're just like yelling at the people. But I guess it's called unethical or something. I don't know. I think it'd be cool to make a website like that, though. If any of you make a cool website that like yells and tears up the user, I'll validate you. I'll go endorse you on LinkedIn. Make it cool, though. Okay, so that's cool. So we know that's working. Bob.com, it's valid. But notice how when we submit, nothing's happening. I don't even know if it's being called. There's no visual representation here. Let's go back to our lead capture. First, let's make sure it's being called. Console.log. We gotteth here. And let's go ahead and just go back to our page, refresh it, and bob at bob.com. Let's Command-Alt-J for the console. We gotteth here. We definitely gotteth here. So it's working. I think we just need to clear it out. So how do we clear the fields? Well, we could do it from here, from our lead capture.jsx, but I don't think that's appropriate. I don't think that this should be manipulating the inner components. I think what we should do is in our name field, we should have a clear function like so. Okay, comma down there. And let's go ahead and just say this.setState. And I'm going to set value to empty. Okay. And then let's go to our email field. See where I'm going with this? And let's go ahead and set a clear function. And let's say this.setState. And we'll say valid is true. We want it back to default. And let's say value is empty. Then back in lead capture.jsx, we'll just clear it out. We'll say this.refs.field email.clear and this.refs.field name.clear. Okay, that's looking good to me. One thing I'm not happy about, excuse me, is I don't like how the name and the email are so close together. So I'm just going to put a BR in here. Just hack it out a little bit there. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. There we go. Refresh. Oh, nice and pretty. Okay, so let's go ahead and say Mary Sue. Mary, I told you just to put a first name. Well, she says it's her first name. She's from Alabama. Anyway, email is marysue@ieatpossums.com. Looks good to me. Submit it. Hey, it cleared, So it's working. There's our component. We can now inject this into any web page. And what's really cool is you could do all kinds of things. Like you could write logic to like swap this out. So instead of having this here, it could be a big, huge check mark that says, successfully submitted. You could do a pop-up. What you could even do is using routing. If it made sense, you could even swap out this whole view with another view inside of it. Really cool stuff, actually. So, how you feeling? Pretty cool. So all we did was we really just used components to create a lead capture form, and we included an NPM package for email validation. We used some state, some functionality here. We didn't do anything really different than what we've done before. We just kind of reiterated some principles. The new thing that we did do, though, is refs. So we did pass in refs, okay, so we could access the child components. But that's it. Looking good. I like it. I like the way it looks. And just to show how easy it is now and reusable, we could easily just throw a few of these bad boys in here. Refresh the page. Oh, come on. Hold on. You're like, it didn't work. Duh, it didn't work because I need to put these in here. All right. I was like trying to show off and you guys are like, this guy's an idiot. All right. So lead capture and what was this? Just 1 and 2? No, not 12. All right, 1 and 2. Now we can refresh the page. And boom! Look at that. 3 lead capture forms. Copy and pasted. Pretty cool. So anyway, that's it. Mark Price here, devslopes.com. Go capture some emails and make some money. And remember, to get your free live help, go to devslopes.com and click on chat room. I'm there all the time, as well as a huge community of other students.